Back again with another video breakdown. Trey Scotti is with me. And Trey, you always dig up some good stuff. Xavier's been playing some pretty good basketball. They've won 2 games in a row over Providence and Butler. What did you come up with us? What did you come up with for us over the last few games?
Yeah, Rick, no clips today. They're making shots, and that's going to be all I got for you guys today. No, but really, I joke, but I really think that is a big part of what we're starting to see, right, is we're seeing a team starting to make shots. When you make shots, that forces the defense to come out and cover more areas of the floor, quite frankly, right? And a guy like Trey Green, Rick, we've talked about it on here, and I'm sure you've talked about this on your pod pods you've done with Paul and all those guys throughout the season. Where is the offense and the shot making going to come from, right? Especially, with Cam redshirting. And so, Trey's a guy that we've singled out a little bit on this pod, and he's a freshman. We've talked about how difficult that is. He's been sick and injured a little bit and missed some practices, and that makes it even more difficult as a freshman. But he's starting to get comfortable. And I think Quincy's been a staple of, he's got the points per game, right? I mean, he's the team's top scorer as of today, and he's had some huge outputs and maybe some games that aren't as good. Maybe his consistency has been a little bit game to game, but throughout the season, he's been a mass producer, and Desmond Claude's been a really good player all year downhill. But to add another guy with Quincy that can consistently make shots, I think that's been a huge difference maker. And then, adding that, Claude is starting to shoot the ball as well as he has. Gitas is starting to shoot the ball as well as he has. McKnight is playing with as much confidence as he's played with all year. And I just think when you have a lot of new players and you get into a system, guys start to be comfortable in their role, and it's less thinking and more playing with instinct. I think Miller talked about that at the beginning of the season. Just kind of, he said, "Hey, bear with us. This is to be expected." The last couple of games, I mean, they've looked like an NCAA tournament team. I think if you just take out the last 3 or 4 games and just group the season, the Ken Palm numbers are really good, and a lot of people are talking about that. But I just think it comes down to making shots, being comfortable, and having multiple options offensively. And not to keep ranting, but when you watch the team at the beginning of the year, you feel like it's got to be Desmond Claude making a play, or it's going to be a game where Quincy gets hot. And besides that, I didn't feel like there's many ways they're going to win the games offensively. They've been defending the whole year, and now it's starting to feel like they can be multiple with their offense and beat you in a couple different ways with a couple different guys. And, I'm sure they're happy with their progress, and if they want to make the tournament, they're going to have to keep this up. So.
Yeah, we talked about that a lot on the podcast he did last night with Paul Fritchner, that they're kind of playing their way to being just on the cusp of being back in the bubble conversation, I think. In another good week or two, they'll be right back in that mix, but they just need to stack some wins for now. In terms of clips, where do you want to start?
Yeah, I want to start with Trey Green. I think it's hard not to. And so I'm going to go ahead and pull it up here. And I put the Trey Green show. And listen, I would love to tell you that there's all these adjustments that Xavier's made and this and that, but I think a lot of times you gotta be patient with your young guys and let them get comfortable and just kind of keep doing what they're doing and staying in the gym with them and keeping their confidence, right? I mean, being a freshman, we've all been there. It's very difficult for any freshman to move across the country and go to school, take care of the business, let alone, compete on a national stage, and basically, college, right? It's no secret. It's becoming pro basketball in a lot of ways. And so Xavier started off the game, this is a little zoom action. They've been running this action all year. It really used to just be Claude at the beginning of the season. We started to see Oliveri getting into it. Again, now they're running plays for Green early. I mean, that's within 6 minutes of the game, and they're just kind of getting Green to a good spot, little mid-range pull-up again. That kind of just, he sees the ball go through, a little bit of confidence early. I mean, this is the very next time he touches the ball. Xavier doesn't score. I was watching this game live, but I remember watching this play thinking like, okay, he's starting to look like he's playing without thinking, right? And so this is just within Xavier's flow offense. And again, normally he's going to come off this ball screen here towards the middle third from Djokovic. He just takes it, makes a quick read. Again, he's playing with pace, makes a great pass to Usman. Usman just misses it. But to me, when you see, this is a guy not thinking. This is a guy playing instinctually in basketball. And while Xavier's offense is designed to use that ball screen, anytime you can get a great rejection of a ball screen and get right downhill into the paint, make a play, I mean, that's a good shot for Xavier's offense. And that's just a guy, again, not thinking, kind of getting into his groove. Then in transition, again, McKnight has been terrific pushing the ball, getting to the play, paint, making his own plays. Here's him finding Green, right? Like that last play, these last couple plays, that's not Xavier necessarily making any adjustment schematically, right? That's just a freshman becoming more comfortable seeing the ball go in the hole in the first couple minutes of the game, right? I mean, Green's been known as one of the best shot makers in the country. He was one of the best players on teams that have competed and won Peach Jams, national tournaments on the high school level. I mean, he's done it in big moments in high school, but playing in these big arenas, right? Just seeing it go in and knowing you can do it, confidence goes a long way. So now he's rolling. You know, Xavier obviously had a really good end of the first half, beginning of the second half against Providence. Again, this is just within their flow, okay? And this is no adjustment offensively. That's just a guy going under a screen, okay? That's probably not Providence plan to go under on Trey Green. And again, he's just reacting. He's not thinking. He's just playing basketball, and that's what you want. You know, it's like I'm listening to a podcast this morning. It's Will Hardy. He's the head coach for the Utah Jazz, and he's talking about, listen, these players are really good players, right? I can't mold every player to play exactly like I want as a robot. Like, these guys got here for a reason. Trey Green was a really, really good offensive player before he got to Xavier, and just seeing him get into his comfort level, right, it's definitely what you're seeing. Here's a little set that Xavier's been running. It's a newer one. This one's pretty fun. Basically, all they're going to do is they're going to set a back screen with Green. Okay, so again, he's setting the back screen. What that does is it just makes his defender kind of back up for 1 second that he may have to guard this back cut, right? So you've got McKnight here on a cut. Again, McKnight's athletic. If his Jaden Pierre's guarding Green, okay, he's on his back. If he doesn't respect McKnight for 1 second, okay, that's just going to be a cut to the basket. That's a layup. So Green actually slips out of this, okay, just for that half-second feel. He slips out. This is not terribly defended, but again, now you've got a guy who's seen the ball go through the hole early. He's gotten one in transition. Providence has made a mistake a few possessions prior in the second half, and you've got a really good shooter who's seen the ball go through the hole, and this is what you get, right? I mean, this shot, you know, back against Purdue, we're sitting there thinking, is this a good shot or is this a bad shot? Right? Well, I don't think anybody's saying that's a bad shot now. And that's just his confidence being built throughout the season, being built throughout the game. And that's why at times you got to let players just kind of get through what they need to get through offensively, roll out the kinks, and it's really starting to pay dividends with what Green is doing. That particular action's become really popular in basketball. Anybody that watches the NBA, Jamal Murray for the Denver Nuggets, he's constantly setting back picks to go into handoffs. And again, when you're setting that back pick, you're hoping the defender that's guarding you is going to have to kind of go away from you for 1 second, and then all of a sudden you're in a scoring opportunity. We saw it carry over a little bit. It wasn't as productive of a game for Green against Butler, but again, I believe he still had 8 or 9 points. I mean, this is him just pulling up from deep in transition, and he's just playing loose. He's playing confident, right? This is Xavier in their four guard offense. Like, that's not a set play. Like, that's just him flowing. Like, he's just playing comfortable. Like, he looks relaxed out there. And again, shooting the basketballs, that it can't be something where you're stressful. It's a very mental thing. And as of right now, man, we're just really starting to see him shoot the ball a lot better. And I think he's going to be a key cog at Xavier, you know, for the rest of the season and really their offensive production over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I felt like that Providence game was the first time that we've really got the full Trey Green, as we've seen Trey Green at the preps level, the full offensive experience where he is just really tough to guard, really playing with a lot of confidence. That play you showed where it really was defended pretty well. I mean, Pierre was just a half step late coming around that screen, chasing him, and that's all he needed to get it off. That shows how dangerous he is.
Absolutely. And Oliveri's been hitting shots like that all year, right? The difference is Oliveri is older and experienced. He's been through a lot more of the wars. He's been starting. He's been getting a lot more shots. And let's be honest, right? Oliveri had some games early in the season where he did struggle. And sometimes you got to miss it to make it. I mean, that's just part of being a shooter's mentality. It's not always going to go in. I mean, Steph Curry had a string of 3 or 4 games back in December where he shot the ball terribly, right? I mean, the best shooters in the world go through slumps. You just got to keep shooting. I think that's why you've seen Xavier live with some of his shots. And that doesn't mean every shot he's taking is perfect, but sometimes you got to live with it. And you want guys playing and reacting, not thinking. And like I said with Green, I mean, I think that he makes their offense so much more dangerous. I think he goes from a guy really on the back end of the scouting report in the opponent's mind. And I think now, if you're a coach for a future game here and you're pulling up Xavier's last 4 or 5 games, you're really worried and concerned about Green coming in, because again, he's a game changer, and shot making is just in today's game, man. It's just so dang important.
We want to jump into Des Claude next.
So I think we need to talk about Des as well. And Des is, he's been probably, in my opinion, as consistent as Xavier's had all season. I mean, he's been their second leading scorer. He's been doing what he does really, really well across the board. Over the last couple of weeks, we've seen Xavier start to post him more. So this is just a little set play. Again, this is pretty basic, right? They're just putting him on the block. I mean, he's got a big guard on him and Stephon Castle. I mean, Castle's only a freshman, but he's a big physical, McDonald's All-American caliber guard from the Atlanta area. We talked about him in the preview. And Xavier just said, okay, we're going to go right at him right in this game. And we saw this a little bit in the UConn game. Just kind of gets to a spot, draws a foul. And then we saw going into the Providence game, they went to this right away. So that was the first time I can remember really seeing the set play, was against UConn. And then going into the Providence game, this is what they wanted to do right away. So this is a similar set, same sort of idea. In the first clip, Oliveri cut to the opposite side where Claude is, just threw it right in. On this one, this is a little bit of a counter. So Oliveri, as opposed to running to the top right in front of Providence's bench, he's just going to loop back around. Claude's going to change sides again. It's just a little bit of misdirection, so it's not completely predictable where the ball is going to go into the post. And you'll see Claude, he doesn't catch it right on the block, right? He's almost out of what would be the high school 3. But again, you're just putting him in an isolation position where our guy's better than yours, giving him space. And Claude is so strong getting to his spot, they score the first possession of the game. Okay, so that's possession 1 against Providence. All right, possession 2. Now they go back. This is the first set we saw against UConn. Oliveri cuts over the top, throws it right into Claude. Again, look, he's not catching the ball in the post. Okay, this is what we consider to be the mid post, which is, a lot of players, it's a turn and face spot. You could back him down from out there, but instead you're trying to catch the ball low. A guy like Claude, who is so good in the painted area, you're trying to get him there closer right from the get-go. Again, 2 possessions, 2 buckets. We see it right away to start the game. They actually went to it a third time there very early. He didn't score, but you could see it was a priority for Xavier's offense. Then we see in the Butler game, this is called a Barkley. Okay, Charles Barkley made this famous. It's a perimeter to post. So one way you can get in the post, right, it's kind of what we saw. You throw the ball in. Somebody's posting up. There's a bounce pass in there, whatever, from a guard. That's kind of traditionally what we think of as a post-up. A Barkley is when you're driving. Okay, you flip your hips, and now you get to a post-up off the bounce, right? So this is something that you see Zion Williamson do a lot as well. Barkley did a lot. The reason for the perimeter post is, 1, it's a player who does have perimeter skills, so they can drive into the post. 2, you eliminate turnover opportunities. So whenever you got to throw the ball in from a guard, right, there's always a chance of a turnover. I mean, I think coaches would tell you feeding the post is a little bit of a lost art. We're seeing less post players, right? So kids are getting less reps of throwing the ball into the post. So when you do this, you take away could be a potential deflection on a pass. You just get to your post up here, and you see this isn't a set play. This is just Claude starting to be comfortable, right? Maybe they talked to them about, we want you to do this in practice. Maybe they didn't, but now he's starting to gain a little comfortability on the post. He goes into it right from transition. That's a bucket. Again, anybody that's matched up with Claude, you got to consider that he's posting up a ton right now, and you're gonna have to have a defender on him who's big and strong enough, because I think anytime that Sean Miller and the staff see a 6'1", 6'2" scrawnier guard on Claude, I think you're gonna see set plays called like that, or Claude just get to it on his own. They just started using it a lot more. It's been very effective. I think it goes into a skill set extremely well. If we remember, this is where Paul Scruggs really, really thrived as a player as well. It's what Villanova has done with their guards for years. And another reason for it is guards are great passers, right? So when you post a guard, okay, now you want to start to double team. That's great, because Des Claude was almost a point guard in high school. We're just going to use our guard, throw it out of double teams, and beat you that way. So I think that's going to also continue to be a weapon. And he's shooting the ball better. I haven't sat there in slow motion and gone to a bunch of practices and watched his shot with incredible consistently, but I do think the ball comes out of his hands pretty well. I think he's a guy who's got a chance to really be a good shooter in time. It's been a little bit flat I thought coming out of his hand, just observing, watching on TV throughout the season and a little bit of last year. And we're starting to see a little bit more arc, probably an adjustment that they've made with him, probably, something that he's starting to realize on his own as well. And he's just starting to hit more shots. And, in this situation, right, this is an under. Okay, it's a handoff. We saw Trey Green earlier. He's probably a guy that Stavs are not going to want to go under on in their game plan. Most of the time throughout the year, I believe Claude shooting mid-20s from three. He is a guy you may go under on. You're like, you know what? He's as good as anybody in the Big East when he gets his shoulders downhill and drives. We may go under a ball screen or under a handoff, make him make threes until he shows that that's what he can do. And he is starting to show he can make these. Again, ball's going in with more consistency. Same thing. We've seen him make some plays off the bounce and isolations. I show these two clips again. Look at UConn. They go under. That's Cam Spencer. That's probably their plan at that point, right? And so we'll just kind of run this back. Again, obviously Claude, he's a better athlete than a guy like Cam Spencer, so he doesn't want Claude to get his shoulders downhill. And now he's starting to make these shots, right? And I don't know, we get into these future games. Our team's going to adjust right now. It's probably too small of a sample size for a lot of coaches. I still think you're going to see some unders. I still think you're going to see opportunities for him to shoot. I think he's going to need to show a larger sample size of making these. But him making shots in the last couple of games, right? Number one, that helps the scoreboard immediately. But number two, if teams start to have to respect and guard him, he's obviously not the shooter that Trey Green and Quincy Oliveira are right this second. But if they have to start to inch the ball out, start to inch their defense out, it's just going to continue to open up off, different options throughout Xavier's offense. And we've brought up this analogy a couple of times, but in football, why do they throw bubble passes when it's a team that can throw the ball downfield? You want the defense to cover different areas, right? If they're only having to cover Des Claude off the bounce, right, it becomes a little bit easier to game plan, contain, and take away things. If he starts to give this option of making shots, it just opens up a lot of stuff. And so these next couple clips I show, right, they seem ordinary, but in my opinion, you're starting to see better spacing, right? And it's like, this is McKnight, and we haven't even talked about him really. I think he's playing his best ball. He's been dynamic in transition the whole season. He's shooting the ball as well as he has. He's getting comfortable, and I think part of the reason he's playing well is you're seeing better spacing. And so, look at Oliveira. Oliveira is up at the Centos on the top left of the screen. Butler is all the way outside, right? Oliveira is almost in the paint. They're still there. You can tell that they're like, we are not allowing Oliveira to shoot good, wide open threes. So what that does is when you're pulling defenders all the way outside the three, a guy like McKnight, who's a dynamic driver, has all of this space. Okay. Same sort of situation here. All right. Now you have Usman in the post, right? I mean, he's been solid as a post player offensively. Okay. Oliveira is all the way out here, right? You're not leaving him at half court. All of a sudden, Claude's been hitting shots the last couple of games, right? If you're Carter here for Providence 22, you're not as comfortable digging in as you did. And just look at Usman. Like, he's got all day on this clip, all of the space in the world. McKnight's made more shots recently. I mean, we talked about, when Xavier beat UC, Wes Miller had the quote that McKnight, hit 2 threes in this game. I think maybe he'd only hit 2 threes in the season to that point. He's definitely hit a lot more since then. You're not just going to completely help off him. And Usman's got all day, all the space, all the time in the world. And this is just a lot easier for him to make plays dealing with that kind of space. And then again, look at McKnight. Okay, he drives the ball to the paint. He's been terrific doing this all season. But now all of a sudden you've got Green on the bottom of the screen who's hot. You don't want to leave him. You've got Claude at the top of the screen, right, who I think you could argue has been Xavier's best all-around player throughout the season. And now all of a sudden Gitas is playing his best basketball shooting it, right? And he starts to get into the groove in this game. Now you're seeing multiple options to make shots, and you're just putting the defense in more binds, Rick, throughout the season. Are we going to help on Claude and the gaps? Are we going to stay with Gitas? He's starting to shoot the ball better. What are we going to do with Claude? Okay, Green comes in. We can't let him shoot threes. We know Quincy's at the top of the scouting report, and it just becomes a lot tougher to defend. You know, when I was at Indiana with Tom Green, he would talk about, he wanted guys shooting threes. I vividly remember an assistant saying, we're settling too much. And Green said, we're not. We want to keep shooting the three. We want the defense to keep coming out, and then it's going to open up everything in the paint. And so that's defined as gravity a lot of times in basketball senses. Xavier's gravity, they're pulling different players and making them respect, you know, what they can do offensively in different parts of the floor right now. And I just think, like we talked at the beginning, that's the number one reason that they're playing better basketball right now.
Yeah, you made the joke at the top that it's just making more shots, but at the end of the day, the make shots offense is a real thing. You know, like just putting the ball in the basket is the name of the game, and if you do that better, all of a sudden everything looks a whole lot better. And we've certainly seen that with Xavier. I'm going to put you on the spot here because it's something that's come up on the message board. Desmond Claude, he's taken 30-ish threes, both off the dribble and 30-ish threes catch and shoot this year. He's made twice as many off the dribble than he has catch and shoot situations. What would be your thoughts on that? Do you think he's getting better looks off the dribble because so many people are going underneath screens, as you just showed, so he's getting more clean looks in those situations? Or do you think it's just too small of a sample size and probably not much you can really take away from that? Or how do you view that?
I think one sample size is definitely relevant in this. I think he's gotten without looking at the film, just my memory recalls him getting clean looks off the catch as well. But the bottom line is shooting the ball off the bounce is more popular today than it's ever been. I mean, you look at James Harden going to the Clippers, right? I mean, you know, Houston ran at the time the most dynamic offense in the history of the NBA with him shooting pull-up jump shots off threes. And so that's blended more into the training, and that's part of the game, right? I mean, some people may not like it, but being able to hit threes off the bounce, I mean, look what Trey Green is doing as well. That's really important. I mean, Oliveri's had his moments as well. I mean, when Trayvon Blewett was here, that's what he did at a phenomenal level. You need guys who get Soleil Boom. He hit a lot of threes off the bounce as well. It's a big part of the game. If you have guys that can do it, straight up, you're going to be a better team who can make shots at the end of the shot clock, you can beat good defense with great offense. And when you can make those shots, it may not be option one in your playbook, but to have it as an option is important. And so I think it's trained a lot as well, Rick, maybe compared to, 15 years ago. Guys are more comfortable taking shots off the bounce just because it's more of today's game. So I think it's probably a comfort level to number one. And then number two, it's I think small data, because I think the ball comes out of his hand pretty well. I mean, he's a guy that, again, I'm not an NBA scout, but if I were to sit there and watch him, I think part of the reason it's intriguing is he doesn't have this shot coming out of his hand that's like, I don't know. You know, if anybody's watching Indiana, they got Xavier Johnson. You know, he's an incredible athlete, but the ball coming out of his hand, it's like, I don't know, that's a shot that can be fixed. Maybe it can, but it's not as likely. A guy like Claude, it's a little adjustment here and there. It's a little bit of confidence. Again, you're not going to be Steph Curry or James Harden in 2 years with your shot making, but he's a guy that I think as time goes on, you're going to have to respect more and more. And so I haven't had a huge problem with the shots he's taken this year. I think a lot of times he's had to by default, because I don't know that early in the season Xavier had many places to go with their offense. And sometimes when you're wide open, you got to shoot it, because if you're not shooting it and you're no threat, now he's posing to be some threat. I don't think you're just going to let him tee him up out there and sit in the paint. If you're not shooting him at all, now all of a sudden there's no respect, there's no gravity to that. And so, I mean, if I was a coaching staff, again, I haven't asked him, don't talk to him about that stuff, but I would be okay with what his shot selection's been to this point. With those 30
and they clearly have confidence in him, because they haven't reined him in at all in terms of taking those shots. He continues to take them, and he's been encouraged to do so. So final clips here on the offensive side. You have some more?
Yeah, well, I do have a couple plays here, Rick, that I wanted to show. So, offensive creativity, we've talked a little bit about what Coach Miller's done, and we've talked a ton about their flow, right? And their flow is what's made them, that's their bread and their butter, made them really special last year. It's continued to show some good looks this year. And so you'll see this clip, right? And again, if you guys are interested, Rick's got the video. We talked about the flow from the offseason about what Xavier's full offense is, but this just looks like any clip, right? And so whenever a big touches the ball on a reverse layup, which Usman does, and he goes to a two-guard side. So he's about to turn to the left. You've got two guards here. You've got McKnight. You got Oliveri. Almost always this guy in the middle, he's going to back cut, right? And so, again, Normally they're just reversing it and they're getting into it. This was a nice little counter from the first play of the half, whereas normally Oliveri, he's going to cut to the corner. And what happens is, right, it's almost like in football, again, we keep using the football analogies, using a different count for a play. You get the defense thinking they're doing one thing. 22 Carter, he's used to just running out and guarding, Oliveri in the opposite side corner. Instead, he's going to whip around and come off a stagger. So the intent is they want this to look like their flow, but in all actuality, this is just a set play where, again, Oliveri's been, the best, most consistent shooter and scorer that Xavier's had, getting him a look coming out of the half. Again, when you can get your best players a good look like that, that's always going to be a good thing. This one's a really fun one, right? I don't know if people caught up on this on TV. Belmont made this famous years ago. This is made to look like McKnight is lost, picking up the ball, okay? Now, they're going to use Trey Green's gravity, which we talked about, right? You're not letting him get a 3 off right now if you're Pierre. I mean, he's probably almost got 20 points at this point in the game or at least 15. And so all 4 of Xavier's players besides Green, they're above the free throw line. This is a design play, okay? Again, it's made to look like McKnight. Oh, shoot, we messed up the play. Boom, backdoor cut, okay? It's made to look like a mess. Like I said, Belmont's made this famous. They've won games with this at the end of the game. But again, that's a fun little set. I haven't seen that from Xavier at any point so far this year, but those are some play designs. And again, Miller, you watch a UConn play, you watch a Creighton play, they're going to throw more sets. They're constantly throwing it. When watching through this UConn game, they don't really have I don't want to say this incorrectly. They don't flow as much as a Xavier, right? It's a little. It's not as much. It is read and react. I mean, they've won a national championship for Pete's sake. So I'm not saying anything they're doing is wrong. It's a little bit more set heavy. And so Xavier is not going to throw in as many of those sets throughout, but what they are going to do is they're going to try to disguise some looks like that again in their flow. And then we've seen times they still go to their set plays to get the ball to Claude in a high ball screen or, like we talked about the post-ups earlier, but for the most part, I don't think you're going to see Xavier go away from the flow. And just a couple, we've seen the backdoor sets out of the flow, just that staggers another little wrinkle. And you just continue to layer that playbook throughout, that playbook throughout the season. And, if you're in the tournament or March or the Big East tournament, and you need to win to get in. That's when you hope your offense is at your most complete point.
Yeah, those are a couple of great ones. The second one, I specifically remember Belmont running that at the end of either a conference tournament game or NCAA tournament game to get a win, and just a fantastic little action there to run, because it really does look like the guy's just getting trapped and about to turn the ball over, and then you hit him with the back cut for the layup. Trey, what else do you have for us?
The last thing I want to talk about is in the UConn preview, we talked a lot about Alex Caravan and just the mismatch problems that he presents. And there's obviously, we've talked a lot about the incoming international bigs and what they can do, what they cannot do. And when Xavier's playing 2 bigs, the other team's got maybe just 1 big. How are they going to match up? And so I just kind of wanted to follow up a little bit on how that's been going. I'm sorry, I missed one thing right before we get into that. The pressure. We talked a little bit about this, but the 1-2-2 soft press, right? Okay. They turned the game with Providence. This is a turnover with 2 minutes. Again, they've just put this in. We talked about this at Christmas, and these couple plays really spun the momentum at the end of the second half or end of the first half against Providence. 2 consecutive turnovers in a row. Continues to just kind of add on to a run that they had. And those were huge plays. But to go back to the bigs, I apologize on that. But Djokovic is still finding his way, right? And I think he's the most talented of the 3 international bigs. But right now, maybe why Giannis is starting over him is he's older. We know that, and he's a little bit more solid. And part of it is in Djokovic's defense, right? He is being forced to guard 4s. Right. And a lot of times 4s are not 4s. A lot of times 4s for the other teams are guards. And so a couple of examples here, right? You see he's in his gap. He's at the Big East logo. Okay. He's got Richard Barron, who's a freshman for Providence. He's not one of their main players. It's a big reason why he's on him to start, right? And in this possession. And again, he just kind of loses track of him. He hides behind him. And again, it's little things like this where if I'm a Xavier fan, I'm not too concerned, right? Here's him just kind of getting out of position. Okay, now Barron's hit a 3, comes up, gets backdoored, right? Barron gets a goaltend, I believe, on that call. And I would not take this and be worried whatsoever. I would take these examples and say, okay, he is a freshman. He's guarding some tough matchups. He hasn't had the luxury of all the minutes to kind of figure this out throughout the season. These are just kind of the reasons maybe he hasn't played as much as people would think from the outside looking in. And I think he'll continue to get better. I think he's got all the talent in the world. I do think he could be, a legitimate pro. We've talked about just his length, his athleticism, his ability to catch lobs. He shoots it, stuff like that. But, you get to the UConn game, right? And in this lineup, we talked about this in the preview. UConn's got 4 guards and Alex Karaban. Well, Alex Karaban shoots. He shoots the ball at an unreal level, right? So now you got Gianni, right? He's on solo ball for UConn, who's a guard. All right. Now you have Djokovic. He's on Alex Karaban, who is a flamethrower on the perimeter. And UConn sees this. They know this. This is a set play. And again, they're going to make him chase him off screens all day. And, let's just be honest. That's not something he's probably used to doing. And I think he's been put in some tough positions. A lot of this is positional because, again, Usman's played pretty well. You got to continue to give him his minutes. He's been a big identity for the team. Xavier out-rebounded UConn 42-30. That's pretty good, right? Sean Miller, he talks about rebounding a lot. To out-rebound them 42-30, I think that's kind of what they're hoping for. And so I don't think they want to get away from this identity of having at least one big out there, if not 2 at most times for the rebounding. But in this situation, right, you've got Pierre Brooks. He's Butler's leading scorer. And this is probably a little bit on Trey Green, probably a little bit on Djokovic, right? But again, Pierre Brooks has started out this game, making shots. He's their leading scorer. You know this. There's just a little bit of a lapse in communication. Apologize. Let me run that back. And I typed freshman mistakes, in my notes on this. But again, this is just 2 freshmen, right? And you just kind of leave a guy like that. Yeah, you look at Sean Miller's reaction on this one. He knows. Look, he's pointing. He's like, do not leave that man. Look, get your hand up. And he knows right away. And that's what you deal with. That's why we've talked about there's 1 freshman starting the entire Elite 8 last year. I don't sit there and look at this and think those guys are going to be bad players. I think that's just kind of par for the course for guys in this situation. So, again, he struggled a little bit. I think we know that, but I think context is important. I don't think the staff has given up on him. I just think right now it's like there hasn't been a lot of great opportunities maybe to give him 30 minutes a game like any kid would want. But I just think that's who they have on the roster. They're playing pretty well right now. Matchups are a big part of it. Giedis has been a guy that teams have attacked as well. Butler came out, and you see Giedis. He started here on this particular player for Butler, who's their second leading scorer. Right. And they came at him right away. This is a ball screen. It's like, can Giedis get over a ball screen? And normally if you think of a ball screen, again, you think of a guy like James Harden using the ball screen. Well, and then there's going to be a guard guarding him. Well, in this situation, okay, a big is probably not going to be as used to getting over ball screens. Right. And they're just getting right downhill. They go right at him. They miss it. But when you get the ball that deep, you put yourself in offensive rebounding positions. This is just in transition. Again, this is a tough matchup for him. This is a tough matchup. And Butler kind of got it rolling earlier in the game, I think because of this matchup specifically. Again, not to pick on the kid, but they're going set plays. They're running the ball right at him. Xavier made an adjustment early in this one, right? They went 4 guards. They brought in Swain and put him at the 4. I didn't bring any clips of this, Rick, but as soon as they went 4 guards, and that's when Xavier really kind of they stopped the water here, for Butler. They made a big run, and it was defensive matchup. So this is something that we've talked about before, and I think we need to continue to monitor game to game for Xavier. It's going to be really, really important. I throw in this clip because Karaban, he had those clips there with Djokovic. Nobody could stop him early on for Xavier. He really got going. He was neutralized to some degree with a guy like Claude, and it's just an interesting clip to me, right? Because you look in front of Xavier's bench, you have Stephon Castle, who again was listed as a point guard in high school. He's now being guarded by Giedis, right? You've got number 3 for UConn, who's by no means a traditional center. Usman's guarding him. And then you've got Claude guarding the tallest guy on the court for UConn, who's kind of their 5 in this moment. And so it just makes for funky matchups when teams have skill at the big positions. And again, Xavier does have big guards like Claude, like Oliveri, like McKnight. And so in some ways you may be worried about matchups. In other ways, they can kind of get creative and, the 1's not always going to guard the 1. The 2's not always going to guard the 2. A lot of times people say your position is who you can guard, right? It's like, hey, a lot of kids that are 5s, I want to be 4s. Well, it's like, if you want to be a 4, do you have the feet to guard on the perimeter? If you don't, that means you have to guard a big. You're probably a 5, right? And that's how the NBA looks at a lot of these things as well. Again, here's Gitas. He's on Castle here. Again, this isn't a set play run at him, but at the end of the day, he's guarding a point guard. Gitas held up pretty well. I mean, I'm showing you some clips of where he did get scored on, but he has responded at certain times in some of these games. They've gone right at him, and he has gotten stops, and I do think he deserves credit. And at the end of the day, between those 3 bigs, the international bigs, the reason I think he's getting the most minutes, there's 2 reasons. One, he's shooting the ball the best, getting the most productive, offensive outputs from him. But 2, I do think he's been probably the best in their scheme defensively, and really in one-on-one situations, he has had the best moments of those 3 guys, specifically guarding on the perimeter. So, and again, here's Caravan again. This is kind of just these clips are all over the place, and I apologize, but at the end of the day, right? Okay, now you've got Caravan. He's at the 5 again for UConn, and Xavier's got 4 guards here. Okay, so it's like Usman is a pure 5. I think we know that, right? He's not fooling anybody for a stretch player. He's a big, physical, blocky, big guy. It's like if he's not guarding Caravan here, who is it? It's a tough puzzle to solve, right? And so now you've got Caravan taking him off the bounce, guards a foul. That's a pretty tough matchup. But Xavier did win the rebound battle, 42-30 against UConn. They did rebound the ball well. They're seeking post-ups right on the other end. Okay, if Caravan is going to drive you, what do you got to do? Post him, right? And so, again, here's Xavier just in their flow offense, doing a good job going right at the lack of size for UConn. I thought that Xavier did a lot of good things. I thought they played well enough to win the game. I mean, the bottom line is UConn's a really good team. They made shots. They went on one little run there at the end. It's a game of runs, and I just think I don't want to give excuses or anything of that nature, but they just made one more big run at the end, and I thought Xavier's physicality paid big dividends in this game. They did a good job of, okay, you're going to pick us apart with Caravan, or you're going to guard one of our guards with a big. Xavier did a good job on the other end, and that's why I just want to show these clips. Like, look at UConn. They got 5 basically guards out here, right? You have 4 pure guards. Number 3 is kind of like a combo forward. Xavier's got Usman and Gitas, and I think Gitas is probably more a 5 than a 4, to be honest, with his skill set and athleticism at this point. Okay, and again, they're just going to go right at him. Seals. Again, you see Xavier sealing. It's not a perfect possession here right away, but at the end of the day, you got Usman. He's got a lot of size and power over this guy. He gets the ball in the hole. And so we've seen Xavier taking advantage of at certain points, with their size, but I do think you need to show the clips where they are rebounding the ball well. They are posting. And sometimes in a game, if Xavier wants to play their bigs. They don't just want to play one at a time. Part of that is you want to get those guys in the game because they're on your roster. That's just part of the decision making at this level. And so if you're going to do that, how can you take advantage? And I think you're just going to see them continue to say, we got to be a great rebounding team with some great size with some of their guards, and we got to be a great rebounding team whenever we have 2 bigs on the floor. And I think you're just going to kind of see them live with some times they're going to get beat on the perimeter likewise, and they got to win more of those matches than they lose at the end of the day if they're going to beat great teams like UConn. So
yeah, that was something that actually came up on the podcast last night as well, just talking about Gitas and how earlier in the year, I felt, especially if you go back to that 3-game losing streak where they lost 3 in a row at the Cintas Center, lost 2 bye games, Gitas was getting punked inside. Physically, guys were going through his chest. They were scoring through him, going right over top of him. I think he's done a good job of getting tougher, getting more acclimated to the physicality of playing at this level and playing in America, playing in the Big East. And there's no longer as much of that going on. Now, he still has his flaws and he's getting beat at times with tough matchups, but they're no longer going right after him inside and just powering through him. And that's giving Xavier the opportunity to say, okay, like, maybe this matchup isn't as good for you, but we can slide Desmond Claude down to the 4 in this situation, let him guard that matchup that you can't take because he's too quick or they're running him off screens, something like that. And Gitas is able to handle the more physical forward type matchups at the 4, at least better than he was earlier in the year.
Yeah. And I don't think this is going away, Rick. Like, I'm not following is Jerome and Freeman. Are they going to be back? Are they not? Right. That's not really a storyline I'm following.
Yeah, that's for next year. They're coming back next year, if anything.
But well, that's what I mean. Even for next year, what I mean is they're not going away from playing 2 bigs. right? It was the same situations last year with Nunji and Fremantle. And Zach is one of the best offensive players in the Big East. Is he going to make the all Big East defensive team? Probably not, right? And so we saw these matchups last year. They've had to work through them. You're seeing them a lot this year. I don't think they're going to change. Their system's been so good offensively. I don't think they're going to change it right now. And they're continuing to recruit that way. Seems like most of these guys on the roster are coming back for the most part. A lot of these international kids are going to be back at least as of today. Now you throw Fremantle in the mix. If he's back, I think he's going to be a pillar of what you're doing offensively the next season. And, part of that too, Rick, is like, okay, you want to run your offense through Stephon Castle. You run your offense through Stephon Castle, right? He's a really good player, right? He's a legitimate NBA prospect, but at the end of the day, man, it's like if you can force a team to play through their 5th, 6th, 7th best player, even if they're a good player through a mismatch, sometimes that's a win. Sometimes that's when you're not taking away everything versus a team like UConn. And so if you do take a Claude and put him on a Caravan, it creates this crazy mismatch. It's like you may live with that. That happens at times where you're like, okay, you know what? Caravan's not beating us. Xavier went into the game with one mindset. Caravan went off, and they finally said, you know what? This is not going to plan. Caravan, you're not going to beat us the rest of the game the way you were early on. And so I think letting those teams play that way, again, we keep using football, but if it's a great passing team, right, sometimes they're going to make you beat you with a run. And that just is what it is. And sometimes you're going to lose. If you're going to lose that way, you're going to lose that way. But I think that's definitely part of the game plan and rationale behind these matchups as well.
Yeah, Trey Scotti, always impressive with the football analogies. Love to hear them. So, Trey, thank you for all the clips today. A lot more good stuff. Any final thoughts here?
Nothing. I just appreciate you having me on. Just going to be interesting to see, if they're able to continue to get this offensive production from different guys across the board. And I'm sure we'll be back to talk about it. So
yeah, definitely. We'll be back breaking it all down. And of course, we mention this all the time, but Trey is in the area. He is doing basketball training. So if you have kids or you yourself are interested in looking for something like that, you can find Trey on Twitter. I'll post the link on the message board, or reach out to me and I'll hook you up with them. So thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Rick.